what's going on? I wanted to do a quick demonstration video showing you guys a config generator that I created for some labs that I've been working on. So I've been recently studying for my CCIE service provider, and part of the whole process of studying for something like this is that you do a lot of labbing and you do a lot of different topologies. At least I do, just to enforce some of the technologies that I'm learning. And part of that is there's a lot of repetitive configurations that comes out of having to create new routers or new instances of a device. Like for instance, this topology that you're looking at here is an MPLS-TE configuration that I'm working on. And so, after I'll get the core configured, I'll do things like, hey, let me add another CE router and see what happens if I do XYZ. So usually it makes me create a new router, um, deploy the configuration, and typically what I do for the new configuration for a new CE router is that I'll, log into that router, log into one of the already configured routers, do a show run, put the configuration into a notepad, and change some variables that are going to be unique to the new device. Which, if you've done that enough times and you do it in the middle of the night and you're in a rush, you usually make a mistake. And so 9 times out of 10, you'll usually end up having to troubleshoot what you did, typing something incorrectly because you just failed to overlook. And we're humans and we make mistakes. So you do things like make your computer do it so that it's consistent. Um, so in this video demonstration, I wrote a Python application that allows me to output configurations on the fly based off of variables. Now, I know a lot of you are probably like, hey, you can do that with Ansible, which you're 100% correct. But one thing that I will say about Ansible, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think Ansible is fantastic. It's great, especially for people for network engineers who are not really keen on writing code, but just really want to automate their infrastructure. So it allows you to really, get after the automation part of it and not having to get into the heart of, writing your own functions, creating classes, and all that good stuff. Because, that is another skill to learn. I will say that, but that's where I see Ansible is really strong. But it's heavy. It was originally a sysadd tool that blended into the networks, and to me, I just see some limitations, especially when there's things that I want to do that I know I can do in pure Python. So in this script, what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on using pure Python um, to write my own templating configuration generation uh, scripts to get after my requirement of creating configs from my devices. So um, start out with the actual Python file. Well, so first off, I'm gonna say that I want to say Jinja2 is built in the Python 3.8 or 3.6 or something like that now. I could be wrong, but like I said, I focused on using pure Python on this. So if Jinja2 isn't a Python built-in Python library, I'm sorry for that. It's a really easy pip install if you don't have it. But personally, I like it and if you don't know what Jinja2 is, Jinja2 is a templating engine. Actually, Ansible uses it. If you ever use the configuration module, it actually uses that to generate configurations with. So it's essentially the same thing on the back end, but it makes it very flexible to create your own configuration templates. So high level, I'm using Jinja as the templating engine. JSON is going to be used for my data structure. So if you're not familiar with what JSON is a serialization language. It's essentially a like for instance, Ansible uses YAML. There's protocol buffers made protobufs, which is Google's serialization language, but it's essentially I don't want to call it a templating language, but it's a serialization language. I like JSON because it's easy to read. It's what I have the most experience using in some of the development stuff that I use, and it's just really handy. And it's built into Python. And then the argparse library, which that library allows you to write your Python scripts and use it more like an application, like a command line tool. If you're familiar with Linux and you're using a completely CLI-based Linux distribution, you're already used to doing stuff like this. It's just the people who wrote this argparse library makes it very easy for you to create your own arguments and execute your own quote-unquote commands using the same essential script file. So what I did here, and we're going to look at the Jinja2 template. So this template is actually in this templates folder here, in this template folder here. And what this does is that I took essentially exactly what I explained to you guys before, is how I go to a router, do a show run, and extract that configuration. I took that configuration and took the stuff that is pertinent to a new deployment for me. And this part is definitely most important. That is probably one of the more important commands. But things like setting the host name. If you look at the JSON file here, the JSON file actually goes into the host name of the device. As you can see, that's the host name of it. We'll just call this demo, or call this demo PE, if I can spell it correctly, demo PE. I always have a loopback 0, but I wanted to add the flexibility of, say that I didn't want to use loopback 0, so I wanted to make my management interface loopback 100. As for the management piece, I put loopback 0, the IP address, and the net mask, and that corresponds to the information here. So on the Jinja template, what's really nice about Jinja is that it has conditionals built into the templating language. So for instance here, I said if management, which is talking about this key here. It will output the data based off of what's inside this dictionary, this nested dictionary. So you'll see management.link ID, .IP address, management.netmask, and then JSON also supports arrays. So I did something where I created a list of interfaces, and then just the stuff that from a base configuration standpoint, the interface description, the IP address, the net mask, I added that information in there, and then it goes and says for interface and interfaces, and then loops this code that's in this loop block here, and then creates interfaces for each interface inside my array that's listed in this JSON file. And that's it. So that's essentially what this is, the, like I said, the templating engine, and then the serialization, or the actual data structure language that I'm using to actually create my new devices. So Python interpreter, before it runs or executes any functions, it reads the code, the script from the top down. So even though I have a bunch of functions here, I'm going to start from the bottom, because essentially I say that if I put my main above this open file, technically if I try to run this main, it won't be accessible to the open file. So just wanted to show you guys from the bottom up, what this looks like and how this works. So after I do my imports at the top, what I did do is set up some global variables. So the template loader is the first one. So what it does is it invokes the file system loader class, and what this does is that it essentially tells the Jinja2 engine where the template folder is, where I keep all my templates at. And then the template environment, what this does is that it tells the environment, the Jinja2 environment, that the loader, what loader to use, which tells it, hey, this is my search path for my actual templates, which is in the local file directory here, right? So moving all down, we'll start from the bottom, and we'll say the infamous if name equals main. So when I run the script, I want to run this main function, and we'll come up to this main function here. So here, what I'm doing is I'm creating an argument parser class. So I'm setting the description saying Cisco Lab Aid. And so that's invoking this class here. Off of that class, I'm running some functions called add argument. So that allows me to add the command line arguments that I want to be able to use on the parser. And then this args variable here, what I'm doing is parsing the args, so that way it's actually reading the arguments based off of whatever I pass into the script. It'll make a little bit more sense when I actually execute the script if you're not following me right now, but this is the setup for the actual application, if you will, itself. So I have a conditional here that says if not args.0.o, which is the output file. So I have one that says base config, so an argument for base config. I have one for TE tunnels. This all started with me doing it based off of doing some TE, MPLS TE tunnel configuration. I ripped out LDP in my lab and I did a bunch of TE tunnels. And if you know that formula, O times N squared, um, which means a lot of tunnels. So having to do that by hand and doing it in a notepad became very tiresome and very annoying. So it initially started out that project started out with this, but then I expanded it and said, oh well, let me go ahead and do a base configuration generator. So that's when I added the base config option. So if arg's not 0, what this is saying is that if I don't supply a dash "o", which is saying the output file name, it's gonna raise an exception to say, please, I can close this out. Please provide the output file name using the dash "o". So that is essentially the conditional check-in to make sure that I actually supply an output file name for the actual text. Let me delete this here so we can show you guys that it actually works. And then if this is false, right? If this is false, because this would be true if I don't supply it. If this is false, it'll actually assign the output file name that I supplied to the application to this variable here. And then I'm saying if I selected the args.baseconfig, I am going to run a function called openFile. And so essentially the base config is saying I'm going to take the args.baseconfig file name, which would be the JSON file that I specified earlier, and it's going to try to open that file. And this is what this function is doing, and it returns the dictionary, the JSON data essentially, which ends up becoming a dictionary back. So supplying the dictionary here, and then I say process iOS, oh excuse me, base config. And so what this function is doing is if I go up here, I'm setting the base config file name, which is the iOS base config Jinja template J2. So that's the file name for the template file. And then based off of that, what I'm saying is the template environment, which is the global variable that I created here. I want to load the template file into this template variable. And then what I'm doing there next is that, as you can see, I supplied the output file name. I'm going to say with open, and I'm going to open up in write mode. I'm going to write the data rendered from the template file. Now, high level, this might be confusing, but when we do it on the command line, it's going to make a lot more sense. So that's essentially what's happening in this script, very high level. And at the end of it, when everything is done, I said completed. Very simple. So let's pull up PowerShell. Right now, I'm already inside the directory of my file. So just one of the cool things that I also love about the argparse library is that if I do something like this, python main.py, and I do a -h, it actually creates your own like help text as if you were running your own command line arguments. So that's one of the really awesome things about the argument parser. So you can do as many essentially, what a lot of people like to do is they like to map their arguments based to different functions. And so that's essentially what I did here. So as I add and grow the script, I can add different functionality and it'll be, independent of the other functions. But if I wanted to see a list of everything that I had there, I can just do a -h to see if it works. So high level, let's do a Python, let's do a CLS. Let's do the same thing, Python main.py, and we'll say --base underscore config as that option. And we have the folder JSON is where my tech template's at, and we'll say iOS base config example, which was the JSON file that I showed you guys earlier, and say that I forgot to put the -o. Remember that exception that I had raised there? It says please provide output file name using the -o. And I can clean this up. I don't actually like seeing the traceback. I can do exception handlers, but beyond the scope of this lab or this demonstration. So I forgot my O. So let's do this. Demo.txt. So you can see it says completed, right? After running that, then I can go in and actually go to my configuration, and as you can see, it exported the configuration as I specified it in that JSON file. And then say that, let's go ahead and just add another interface just for the heck of it. And let's say gigabit 3. Let's run this again. And it should overwrite that file if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it overwrites it. So you see how it adds the new interface in there. So some of the flexibility, and just showing you guys some of the cool things that you can do without having to install Ansible. Don't get me wrong, Ansible is awesome. There's other configuration tools that are out there, but um, this is outside of the demonstration. I love where the industry is going when it comes to the network automation. But what I fear is happening, and I don't think a lot of engineers are catching this, network guys are catching this, is that, one of the things that I felt that made network engineers so powerful and so flexible is the fact we're learning standards, not necessarily a product. And I say that meaning that, if a system engineer is working in a Windows environment and tomorrow the company says, "Hey, we're getting rid of all our Microsoft servers and we're going to put Red Hat domain controllers." They're going to be like, "What? I don't know Red Hat and da 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 da. Now you got to go learn a whole new product, a whole new system, a whole new different architecture in order to now administer your network, your environment," which usually means either getting new help or spending a lot of money in training. Where in networking, it's not so much that. Yes, CLI syntax is a little bit different. There's some quirky operations based off of implementations of the RFCs, but usually if you work on OSPF on a Juniper router, it's going to work the same as OSPF on a Cisco router or a Brocade router. Um, it really doesn't matter the vendor so much, mainly just because it's the technology that you're implementing. Now, if you implement a proprietary protocol that vendor has implemented, that's a different story. But those days are pretty much over, I would say. But that's one of the beautiful things that I love about networking. And with SDN, that slowly is kind of fading out. And I say that for the fact of like the Cisco SD-WAN products, the Viptela stuff. It's awesome, don't get me wrong, but you're learning a product, and if that product is no longer viable for an operation for a network operation shop, then the skill set that you and all the time and investment that you put into it is not going to be viable. Um, so where I feel like the network automation shines, especially for network engineers, is that you learn the fundamentals of what makes these automation solutions work, and 9 times out of 10 you can actually build your own products using Python or whatever programming language that you decide to use. Um, for the longest times, and pretty sure most guys experience this, most engineers, when you get hired into an environment, you're usually not redesigning and re-architecturing the network. You're usually supporting what's already there, expanding on it, breaking it down, but it's not really redoing it from scratch. And what's happening with the SD-WAN stuff and the network automation stuff, it's bringing us closer to the business logic. So what I love about programmers is that in the programming world, you're directly related to business functionality, business requirements, if you will. So if there's something that the business needs to accomplish, they come up with requirements. The implementer, the programming language people, the programmers themselves implement that logic, and so they're way closer to the business than the network guy is. These days, that's slowly dwindling into where, the network doesn't work as fast as where the applications that are being written on top of them are operating. And so this is where the SD-WAN is really going. And as a network engineer, with our skill set of knowing and understanding the RFCs that we've already been supporting for so long, to take those skills and do things like write your own Python script to interact or automate certain things, is where I feel like you guys are really shine. And this demonstration was really just to kind of harp on that, from the aspect of uh, the possibilities are endless. You can see this is a basic CLI tool, but say that I took it a step further and I decided to write my own Flask application. And I can use the same functions that I wrote here and have it invoke in using a nice web GUI, and deploy it in my environment and have a config generator that's web-based opposed to being CLI-based. Instead of having output to a text file, I can have it actually push it to the device, or have it set to a repository that sends it to some kind of configuration management system that does, code validation. There's so many different things that you can do as a network developer now, outside of learning the products that are being, I want to say forced down our throats, but really being shown to us, which I feel like a lot of those products have a lot of limitations. Knowing skills like this as a network guy or gal would set you so much further apart, than learning the actual product. And that's where I feel like the systems people are pigeonholed onto, is that most of those guys know specific system architectures, which is great, but if that architecture gets phased out or a company decides that they don't want to go Linux, they don't want to do Microsoft and they want to go Linux, Most Windows administrators are stuck on that product, and with the networking, I think that in order to keep us relevant and keep our edge, um, learning things like pure Python and writing your own scripts and writing your own applications um, can really help grow the business and show your employer that, you know, especially the money that I'm gonna say the money that we're making now, but the money that network administrators and or network engineers are making can get up to the world of, software developers and probably even more, because software developers, they're very good on writing business logic. They're really good on writing code, but when it comes to understanding network RFCs, um, not so much. So, as network operators and engineers, this is where I feel like this skill set would, shine 1,000 times for us. Um, so this is a quick demonstration, very, very simple. But if you guys want the code, I'll post it on my GitHub. Just leave it in the comments, and I'll share it with you guys. But I'll clean it up, make it a little bit more readable, add some comments in there. But if you guys are, wanted to check this out, be my guest. Let me know. All right, thanks.